Henry Cavill out, James Gunn in. A clean slate for Superman and the big screen start of a whole new DC universe. How exactly did we get here? From the first appearances of Superman on screen to the latest attempt to get him right. This is everything you need to know before you see Superman, including what's going on with the robots and all those other weird-looking heroes. In December 2022, Gunn told The Hollywood Reporter that the Superman script he was writing, then called Superman Legacy, would focus on a younger Supes who's at an earlier stage in his career. It's true that actor David Corenswet, who plays Superman in the 2025 film, now just called Superman, is around 10 years younger than Cavill, but the trailers for Superman indicate that he's no rookie. He's catching heat for acting internationally and already has a close relationship with Lois Lane. She knows he's Clark Kent.
Superman.
Miss Lane.
The much bigger difference seems to be tonal, where much of the DCEU aimed for a gritty feel where superheroes had to kill to get the job done. 2025 Superman appears to have a much sunnier outlook, where Superman is far more focused on saving people who are in danger than permanently eliminating evildoers. He's still clearly having to overcome hardships, and he's even got some vulnerabilities, considering that he's seen bleeding from the mouth at the start of the very first trailer. But the colors are brighter, the characters are more comic book accurate, and there's a cute dog. Gunn has been more than forthcoming about the comic book series that has most influenced his take on Big Blue, the 12-issue All-Star Superman series by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely, which ran from 2005 to 2008. Gunn confirmed at a press briefing at the premiere of the first trailer that Superman isn't an adaptation of the comic series, but it does aim for its sensibility. He said, "Some of the aesthetics of what Grant wrote and what Frank drew were incredibly influential. They also had that sort of science fiction and the idea of Lex Luthor as a mad scientist sorcerer, almost. You know, science is his own sort of sorcery." One of the key themes of this series, which focuses on Superman trying to make the most of the time he has left after finding out he's dying, is seeing the good in others and helping them see the good in themselves. One of the series' most memorable single pages involves Superman talking a teenage girl off a ledge, telling her things are never as bad as they seem. One of the key antagonists of the series is one of Morrison's earlier creations with artist Val Semix, Solaris The Tyrant Sun, who also appears in Gunn's film. More on that shortly. After it was announced that Gunn and Safran were taking over DC Studios, plenty of existing projects in the pipeline still came out, leading to some confusion among fans about just what the future of DC's shared movie universe would be. Would anything from the previous decade of the DCEU still fit into this new universe? 4 DCEU movies hit in 2023: Shazam! Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. And there was also the Gunn-helmed TV show Peacemaker, the first season of which aired in 2022, and which followed directly from his DCEU movie, The Suicide Squad. Given that it played with the timeline and tinkered with the multiverse, The Flash was touted as a big reset for the DC movie universe, meaning that the movies that came after it could have potentially fit into the new Gunn-led DCU. Gunn even said as much, posting on X in response to a fan question about Viola Davis continuing to play her role of Amanda Waller from the Suicide Squad movies and Peacemaker. Flash reset many things, not all things. Some characters remain the same, some do not.
It's one of, our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected.
Gunn hasn't made too many promises about keeping anything from the DCEU except for some actors. He said in a statement, "The one thing that we can promise is that everything from Superman forward will be canon and will be connected. We're using some actors from the past, we're not using other actors from the past." For instance, Gunn went out of his way to reply to a tweet claiming that Gal Gadot had been let go in her role as Wonder Woman, to state that she had not been released like Cavill was. That said, director Patty Jenkins' proposed Wonder Woman 3 has reportedly been scrapped. Gunn has described the Blue Beetle movie as disconnected from the rest of the DCEU, meaning it could potentially be part of his new universe. The actor who played Jaime Reyes in the film, Xolo Maridueña, is indeed returning to voice him in an animated series, slated for release in 2026. But the actor told The Direct in February 2025 that he hadn't talked with Gunn yet about a live-action return. In practice, it seems like Gunn and Safran have mostly thrown out what came before. Gunn has even stated that the first season of Peacemaker, which included a cameo from the Justice League in its finale, isn't canon. The second season, which premieres in August 2025, and as much of the same cast as the first, will be. It does seem that the animated Creature Commandos, which premiered in 2024, is also solidly part of the DCU. Now let's talk about Elseworlds.
DC Elseworlds, outside of the mainstream DCU continuity.
That's right. Thanks, James. Elseworlds has long been the term DC Comics has used for out-of-continuity stories about Batman being a pirate or Superman's rocket landing in the Soviet Union instead of the US. Stuff like that. For the movie and TV DCU, though, it's more of just a catch-all term for stuff that doesn't fit into the broader puzzle, like director Matt Reeves' The Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker movies. Gunn has already announced that the DCU will have its own Batman, who will be in the announced but as yet undated Brave and the Bold movie. It's been theorized that a DCU Batman could appear even earlier in the 2026 Clayface film, given that Clayface is a Batman villain. The Batman sequel is planned for 2027, so yes, there will be 2 concurrent movie Batmen, and that's at minimum. There was a little Bruce Wayne and Joker after all, but that's also not really anything new. Pattinson's Batman first hit the screen when Ben Affleck was still actively the DCEU Bats too. What Gunn has made clear is that anything that isn't in the mainline DCU will be prominently labeled as Elseworlds, so that fans know what part of the larger meta story and what stands on its own. Now that we've seen the behind-the-scenes table setting, we can dive into what the new film has to offer. Some fans who have largely stuck to non-comics media were surprised to see Superman's loyal, cape-wearing dog helping him out in the teaser trailer.
Krypto, take me home.
But Krypto the Super Dog, who we have to note is not named after Bitcoin, has been by Soup's side since his debut all the way back in Adventure Comics issue 210 in 1955. Krypto has appeared as a bunch of different breeds over the years, and he has different origin stories because the DC universe has been rebooted a few times. But generally, he's Jor-El and Lara's family dog back on Krypton, making his way to Earth to reunite with Kal-El when Superman is a teenager or adult. In the original and some later versions of the story, Jor-El launched a test rocket with Krypto inside before sending off Kal-El. The test rocket went a little off course, so it arrived on Earth later. Though he's appeared on TV, on Titans, and the recent CW Superman and Lois show, this is Krypto's first appearance in a live-action film. Kids at least will recognize Krypto from the 2022 DC League of Super Pets movie, where he was voiced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and was the de facto star. We seriously doubt he'll talk in the new Superman film, and would eat our shoes if he was voiced by The Rock. It's unconfirmed as of the making of the video just what the giant cosmic entity wreaking havoc through the window behind Lois and Clark in the trailers is, but considering how much Gunn has pointed to the influence of All-Star Superman, the safe money is on that thing being Solaris The Tyrant Sun. Solaris isn't an actual star, it's a robot that went mad with power and battled various generations of Supermen over centuries. It first appeared in the DC 1 Million event, battling the Justice League of the 853rd century. In All-Star Superman, it allies with Lex Luthor and attacks Earth, hoping to replace Earth's yellow sun. It beams red light rays to Earth in an attempt to neutralize Superman's powers. Using a solar suit to block those rays, Superman sicks a creature called a Sun Eater on Solaris, causing it to burn out. But even then, Superman insists on rehabilitating rather than destroying the Tyrant Sun. It's yet to be seen just how large a role Solaris will play in the film, but it's definitely a big swing for Gunn to probably include it. Lex Luthor is almost as well known as Superman. He's Big Blue's arch-nemesis after all, but the character has changed pretty drastically over the years, both in comics and film. In his first appearances in the early 1940s, Luthor didn't even have a first name. He was just a megalomaniacal bad guy with plans to gain power. He had no real connection to Superman beyond the hero constantly foiling his plans. He also had hair. He eventually became bald thanks to an art mistake in a comic strip. In the 60s, Luthor got his first name Lex and became a childhood friend of Clark Kent's. He was depicted as a scientist who's determined to prove he's smarter than Superman. The seeds of Lex as an evil business mogul were planted with Gene Hackman's portrayal in the 1978 Superman film, with his plan involving buying cheap real estate and then selling it at a far higher price after bombing the San Andreas Fault. Evil businessman Lex was christened in the comics with the 1986 reboot of the DC universe. He's been the head of a corporation that bears his name ever since. The DCEU version of the character, played by Jesse Eisenberg, modernized the idea, making him a tech mogul. The new Lex in Gunn's movie, played by Nicholas Hoult, seems to have a little bit of it all. Similar to All-Star Superman Lex, he's clearly a billionaire businessman, but he's also a scientist and megalomaniac. It's also at least implied in the trailer that he's the president, which comics Lex has been too.
Did you consult with the president?
Like many members of Superman's supporting cast, Lois Lane has changed pretty considerably over the decades. She and Clark Kent have been married, then not, then married again on a few separate occasions. But one consistent through line is that she's a dogged investigative reporter, and that's definitely how Rachel Brosnahan's depiction comes off in what we've seen of Superman so far.
This is how you're gonna be?
I'm not the one being interviewed, Superman.
As we mentioned, it's clear that Lois knows Clark is Superman, but we don't know exactly how far along their relationship is. They make out in the kitchen, we know that much. As for Superman's best friend, Jimmy Olsen, we've only caught fleeting glimpses of Skylar Gisando's take on the character. We do know that he at least works at the Daily Planet, where the comics version of Jimmy has worked as an office boy, cub reporter, and photographer over the years. Jimmy has also had nearly 24 different superpowers. He was a giant turtle man once. We kinda doubt the new movie will have time to get to that, but who knows about the future of the DCU. The trailers have also showcased a few superheroes besides Superman, and it looks like they're a version of Justice League International, for reasons we'll discuss in just a moment. One of those heroes is Mr. Terrific, played by Eddie Gathegi. The version from the movie Michael Holt is actually the second iteration of the character. The first, Terry Sloan, debuted in Sensation Comics issue 1 in 1942, and was so dedicated to the idea of fair play that he wrote it on his costume. The Holt version of Mr. Terrific, an accomplished athlete and inventor, debuted in 1997 in the Spectre issue 54. He's constantly orbited by T-spheres, devices he invented that he can use to hack into computer systems, make himself invisible, attack bad guys, and lots more. Both versions of Mr. Terrific have traditionally been members of the Justice Society of America. The movie Mr. Terrific seems to be throwing in with the JLI, though it's the hardest to tell with him. Yes, that's a Green Lantern in the Superman trailers, but it's not Hal Jordan from the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, and it's not Jon Stewart from the Justice League cartoons. The character Nathan Fillion is playing is Guy Gardner, who first appeared in 1968's Green Lantern issue 59 as Hal Jordan's backup. Since then, Gardner has gone on to join the Green Lantern Corps and Justice League International, which he also seems to be part of in the movie. Gardner's comics characterization is that he's hot-headed, argumentative, and abrasive.
Don't agitate the prisoner, Gardner.
What, are you kidding? Agitating's the best part.
His most famous comics moment was probably when he challenged Batman's leadership in the JLI, leading Batman to take him down with a single punch. Fillion's Gardner will also appear in Peacemaker Season 2, alongside the third GLI member in the trailers is Hawkgirl, played by Isabella Merced. To be frank, Hawkgirl's comics history dating back to her debut in June 1941's All-Star Comics issue 5 is too complicated to explain briefly. The main thing to know is she's a reincarnation of the Egyptian goddess Cheara. The version Merced is playing is a modern version, Kendra Saunders. When Kendra died, the spirit of the Golden Age Hawkeye entered her body, making her the new Hawkgirl. There are some versions of the character who are of alien heritage too. Like we said, complicated. Like Mr. Terrific, the various incarnations of Hawkgirl have usually been in the JSA. She's also been a member of the Justice League, including in the Justice League cartoon. For the movies, she's throwing in with the JLI. If you look closely at the three members of Justice League International in the trailer, you can faintly see a JLI logo on their costumes, but it's another logo in the trailer that gives away the game, the one on Lois's recorder during her interview with Superman. It distinctly says Lord Tech at the top, which means there's another super-rich businessman making moves. In the comics, Maxwell Lord is the force behind the creation of the JLI. It's eventually revealed that he does so at the behest of a malevolent supercomputer that wants to use the group as part of a plan for world domination. The Lord of the comics goes back and forth between full-on villain and a moral businessman. A version of Lord played by Pedro Pascal was one of the villains in 2020's Wonder Woman 1984, but the new DCU portrayal by James Gunn's brother, Sean Gunn, seems to follow the comics a little more closely.
Am I supposed to be able to hear you guys?
Excuse me?
He doesn't appear in the Superman trailers, but he is in the trailer for Peacemaker Season 2, where you can also make out the JLI logos a lot more clearly. Another character we've only caught brief glimpses of in the Superman trailers is Metamorpho, the Element Man, played by Anthony Carrigan. There's a close-up of his face in the teaser, and in the full trailer we can see him seated as Superman is detained in a glass case. There's also a quick shot of Metamorpho's hands turning into crystals of some kind. Rex Mason first appeared in The Brave and the Bold, issue 57, in 1965, and he's one of those especially weird Silver Age concepts. After being exposed to a radioactive meteorite, his body transforms into various elements, enabling him to change himself into different chemical compounds. He's been on teams including the Doom Patrol and the Outsiders, and he was also briefly a member of an offshoot of the Justice League International, Justice League Europe. It's unclear whether he'll team up with the other heroes in the DCU though. In several shots of the trailer, Lex Luthor can be seen accompanied by what looks to be his right-hand woman, who can shape her body into various weapons or even into just a crawling mass of nanobots. It'd be understandable if you thought this was some new take on Mercy Graves, Lex Luthor's bodyguard, who was first introduced on Superman the Animated Series and became a cyborg in the comics. But Deadline reported back in 2023 that Venezuelan actress Maria Gabriela de Faria is playing Angela Spiker, the engineer. From what we've seen though, the use of nanotechnology is the only real similarity to the comics version. The Angie Spiker version of the engineer, the second character with the name, debuted in 1999's The Authority Issue 1 and has always been a pretty heroic character overall. Perhaps she's in for a change of heart in the film. Gunn has announced an upcoming Authority movie somewhere down the road. Another of Luthor's enforcers, who we see fighting Superman in a baseball stadium and leading Big Blue away after his apparent arrest, is a figure in an all-black costume and a full face mask. He seems to be able to go punch for punch with Superman, so he has some serious superpower. The second trailer also reveals a large U on his chest, indicating but not necessarily confirming that this is Ultraman. So who's that? Well, in the comics, Ultraman first appeared in Justice League of America issue 29 from 1964. He's an evil alternate universe version of Superman who leads a group of villainous variants of the Justice League called the Crime Syndicate of America.
They'll fold, or we'll fold them, just like everybody else who gets in our way.
He's usually depicted as being from Earth 3, though there's also a version of him from an antimatter universe. So is that an evil Superman under that mask? There are several other character appearances we could mention. Ma and Pa Kent are here. They're pretty self-explanatory. It's been rumored that Millie Alcock's Supergirl will appear to tee up her 2026 film Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, but that's not confirmed as of the making of this video. There's a flying villain in a metal suit who shoots beams from his eyes. He's apparently an original creation, the Hammer of Boravia. So let's finish up by talking about those robots in Superman's Arctic Fortress of Solitude. The notion of Superman having robotic assistants dates back to 1949's World's Finest Comics, issue 42, though for years they were exact duplicates of Superman that often allowed there to be a Clark Kent and a Superman at the same time. The robot as caretaker idea emerged when the Kryptonian robot Kelex took on the job. Kryptonian helper robots appeared in the DCEU films, with one even being called Kelex, but the robots in Gunn's film look very different. They seem to be based on the ones in, you guessed it, All-Star Superman. Gunn's take on Superman is the newest piece in a decades-long puzzle to get the first ever superhero right on screen. Superman started appearing in non-comics media almost immediately after his 1938 debut by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in the pages of Action Comics issue 1. There were the Max Fleischer animated shorts and 2 film serials in the 40s, as well as a radio show, which debuted the character Jimmy Olsen. The radio show eventually evolved into the Adventures of Superman TV series, starring George Reeves in the 1950s. But Big Blue ended up having a 40-year journey to feature film. Director Richard Donner's Superman the Movie, starring Christopher Reeve, finally hit screens in 1978, touting its special effects with the tagline, "You'll believe a man can fly." Indeed, the flying effects were a pretty spectacular level up from previous live-action attempts to portray Superman.
Hey, Jim! Whoa!
Excuse me.
That's a bad outfit!
The film covered the hero's origin, coming to Earth from the doomed planet Krypton and growing up in Kansas, and his first showdown with nemesis Lex Luthor. It was so successful, its $300 million worldwide box office would be nearly $1.5 billion today. That the superhero film genre has been chasing that high ever since, with lots of films directly and indirectly referencing scenes from Superman the movie. Warner Brothers hoped to immediately capitalize on the success of Superman the movie with a sequel featuring the hero fighting escaped Kryptonian criminals.
Come to me, son of Jor-El! Kneel before Zod!
1980's Superman 2 was another box office success, though it did make a bit less than the first one. It was kind of a disaster behind the scenes, however. Much of the sequel was filmed at the same time as the first movie, under Donner's direction. After the release of Superman the movie, though, producers fired Donner over tensions regarding the budget and production schedule. They replaced him with Richard Lester. Lester returned for Superman 3 in 1983, which only took a little over a third of the box office of its predecessor. Though it has an enjoyable performance from Richard Pryor, critics found it goofy and largely a rehash of the previous films. By the time Superman 4: The Quest for Peace was released in 1987, the writing was on the wall. The budget and box office were both fractions of the original movies. Critics despised it. A planned sequel was cancelled. What followed the failure of Superman 4 was a 19-year break from the big screen. While Batman took over movie duties, Superman shifted back to TV. The series Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman debuted on ABC in 1993. It was initially meant to be more of a look at the personal lives of Clark Kent and Lois Lane, but over time it became more of a superhero action show. Superman the animated series got going on the WB in 1996, with much of the same creative team as the critically acclaimed Batman the animated series. Its mix of a throwback look with modern storytelling sensibilities made it a depiction of Superman that's still fondly remembered. Smallville debuted also on the WB in 2001. The teen drama was dedicated to focusing on Clark Kent before he became Superman, and kept that promise right up until the very end, despite depicting lots of other superheroes near the end of its 10-season run. Superman taking 19 years to return to theaters was not for lack of trying. Writer Kevin Smith pitched his idea for the film Superman Lives to producer John Peters in 1996. Smith has since told multiple stories about how Peters didn't want Superman to fly in the film. He also wanted Superman to fight a giant spider.
Like every day with the fucking spider.
Despite director Tim Burton and star Nicolas Cage being attached, the project was ultimately abandoned. There were other attempts to develop a Superman film, but what finally got released in 2006 was Superman Returns, a distinctly odd project from director Bryan Singer. With a new star Brandon Routh, the film was a second attempt at Superman 3, a direct sequel to the first two Christopher Reeves films. It even reused the original film's theme music by John Williams. It found Superman coming back to Earth after a 5-year sojourn back to the location of Krypton, only to find that Lois Lane had gotten engaged and had a son in the meantime. While Superman Returns was a moderate success with critics and audiences, it wasn't enough for WB to continue with a planned sequel. The general consensus on the film seems to have soured over the years too, with many seeing the opposite problem as Superman 3, that it was too serious and not especially fun. While working with director Christopher Nolan on The Dark Knight Rises in 2008, writer David S. Goyer pitched his idea for a Superman movie reboot. Nolan took it to Warner Brothers in 2010 and became producer on the new take on Supes. The studio hired Zack Snyder to direct, and what resulted was the first film in the DC Extended Universe, 2013's Man of Steel, starring Cavill as Big Blue. The film provided a revised origin story and also brought in reworked elements of Superman 2, making General Zod and his Kryptonian lackeys the villains. The film proved divisive thanks to its grim tone, which included Superman killing Zod in the climax. But it was also the biggest box office success in the franchise since Superman 2, seeing an opportunity and a need to catch up to Disney and Marvel's already thriving MCU. WB opted to build out the DCEU with 2016's Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, also directed by Snyder, instead of a direct sequel. As the title implies, it features the two heroes fighting each other until they realize Lex Luthor is manipulating them and they're on the same side.
Find him! Save Martha!
In a nod to the Death of Superman comic storyline, Cavill's Superman dies in the film's climax. The spectacle was an even bigger box office win than Man of Steel, and the DCEU was off and running. Batman v Superman paved the way for the 2017 Justice League movie, in which Cavill's Superman is brought back to life, first as a raging madman, but eventually more like his old self. Unfortunately, that movie was similar to Superman 2, in that it was artistically hindered by having to change directors midstream, from Snyder to Joss Whedon. Cavill was required to come back for reshoots, and the mustache he had grown for another movie, Mission Impossible Fallout, had to be digitally removed.
It's meant to wind like a river. It comes and goes.
Justice League didn't live up to WB's financial expectations, so the studio changed its plans, scrapping plans for a Man of Steel sequel. Further ideas for a sequel never got far, so Cavill's next appearance as Superman outside of the release of the Snyder Cut of Justice League ended up being a cameo in 2022's Black Adam, which was a bomb by every measure. His last hurrah ended up being a CGI cameo in 2023's The Flash. He appears when the Flash changes the timeline to save his mom. Later CGI cameos also include George Reeves' Superman, Christopher Reeve's Superman, and even Nicolas Cage Superman fighting that spider. Cavill filmed additional scenes, but they were cut out of the final release. Will Gunn's version be the one that finally sticks the landing? We'll find out on July 11th.